Welcome to the Chronicles of a Cheating Wife channel. A new story every day. Don't forget to subscribe. She whispered not my name. At first, I couldn't believe my own ears, but the shock ran deeper when I realized she was right beside me. Close enough that her breath grazed my cheek, yet the name she breathed into the darkness of our bedroom was not Michael. It was Alex. Right then, it was as if my heart forgot how to beat. Time slowed, the shadows on the walls lengthened, and in those stretched, silent seconds, I felt a deep, dull ache burrow under my ribs. I lay there motionless, careful not to stir. My arm was still around her waist, the same position we'd fallen asleep in, or so I'd thought. Victoria Finch, my wife, the woman I'd believed I knew inside and out, the mother of the boy I had been teaching to hold a spoon, to pronounce his first words, to carry wedding rings on our 10th anniversary. The same woman who, as night turned into early morning, whispered another man's name. No matter how well I'd convinced myself that the distance between us lately was only temporary, in that one moment, all illusions splintered like fragile glass. I kept my eyes closed, but my mind raced. Normally, I would have shot upright and demanded an explanation, or cursed, or done something. That's what a man does when he senses betrayal. He defends his territory, roars, and makes it clear that he isn't to be trifled with. But I did none of that. Instead, I willed myself to remain still. In that suffocating darkness, the raw finality of her admission, her slip of the tongue, drained my energy. Perhaps that was the moment I realized a far worse pain had only just begun. She drifted back to sleep. I lay awake, eyes open but seeing nothing. My heart hammered in my chest for hours, but outwardly I stayed cold and silent. The hum of the air conditioner, the faint whistle of wind outside, it all turned surreal, like I was no longer a part of that room. In my head, images of her with this man, Alex, began to form, unbidden. She'd said the name quietly, almost tenderly, and the sting of it lodged into my gut. Even if I demanded she repeat it, the damage was done. It was nearly dawn when I got out of bed. I slipped from beneath the sheets with careful precision, as though crossing a minefield. Victoria Finch gave a faint sigh and turned over, tugging the blanket tighter around her. I watched her for a moment. The silhouette of her body in the dull gray light reminded me of the day we first moved into this house, how she danced across the living room in delight. She teased me, saying we should paint the walls a bright turquoise. I remember the echo of her laughter in that empty space. I walked out, shutting the bedroom door behind me with barely a sound. My legs felt unsteady, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep, but the rest of me felt strangely numb. The hallway was filled with the soft glow of morning. My gaze drifted to the photographs on the wall. Our wedding day, two shy smiles captured by a friend's camera in front of a small chapel. Another shot of us at Niagara Falls, drenched in mist, her grin wide, my arm around her shoulders. The biggest photo was one of me lifting her up on a beach in Hawaii. She'd squealed in delight, and we'd asked a passing tourist to take the picture. Perfect strangers had captured our perfect memory. It felt like I was looking at someone else's life, each frame mocking me, telling a story about a couple I thought we were but clearly hadn't been for a while. My hand shook as I reached up to remove the largest photograph from its hook. I carried it quietly to the kitchen. Something about the stillness of the house, the way the coffee machine blinked 5:40 m, the hush in the rooms, made me feel like an intruder. I set the frame on the counter and stared. I noticed details I'd never paid attention to before. The swirl of water behind us, the tiny grain of sand on her knee, the excitement in her eyes. How many times had I looked at that photo and felt pride, warmth, comfort? I wiped a hand down my face and realized I was breathing harder than usual, as if something inside me was braced for an explosion. But no explosion came. My insides were locked in a glacier. Every bit of me felt numb. That's when I decided to do something so trivial, yet it felt monumental. I removed the back of the frame, pulled out the photograph, and slid it into the shredder we kept near the kitchen desk. I paused, my finger on the button. The small machine flickered to life. The whir was surprisingly loud in the stillness. I pressed down. The shredder drew the photograph in. The moment I heard it tear through the center of our beaming faces, I exhaled. I didn't know how long I stood there, feeding photograph after photograph into the shredder. Each memory, ripped apart, disposed of in thin, curling strips. It was the only thing I could control at that hour. The rest of my life was suddenly uncertain, unknown. When I was done, I took the entire bin of shredded photos out to the garage. The sky had lightened to a pale, watery blue, and a light drizzle began to fall. I opened the garage door, scattered the strips of paper on the driveway, and watched the rain soak them. Colors, once bright, bled into each other, blues, reds, and the tan shade of my own face. The water turned pinkish in places, like the pastel remains of a dream. As the paper dissolved into a pulpy mess, I walked back inside, feeling not lighter, but emptier. That was the beginning of the end. The next few days passed in slow motion. I kept replaying the sound of her whisper. Alex. Like a broken record skipping over the same groove. I'd stare at Victoria Finch as she moved around the house, or chatted on her phone, or fussed over the boy. At times, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Then she would look at me, and her eyes would flick away too fast, her smile too forced. We were both acting, dancing around the truth that was waiting to claw its way to the surface. And then everything snapped into focus the morning the envelope arrived. A thick, official-looking court document. It was in the mail, buried under a grocery flyer and 2 credit card offers. The return address read, Multnomah County Circuit Court. My name typed neatly on the label. I'd just parked outside, coming home early from the office after telling my boss I felt sick. Sick inside. That was no lie. The contents of that envelope redefined sick. Inside, I found a neatly stapled set of papers, a paternity claim for child support. For a child named Aaron Griffin, age 3. The father, Alex Griffin. It named me, Michael Finch, as the respondent in a bizarre twist of legal jargon. I flipped the pages. It explained that Alex Griffin was filing for official recognition of paternity, which, bizarrely, involved disclaiming me as a possible father. My adrenaline spiked reading the words. DNA tests confirm biological father is Alex Griffin. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the papers. There, attached at the back, was a copy of the DNA results. The date matched the approximate time we discovered Victoria was pregnant. Even though I was never 100% sure the boy was mine, Victoria and I had had a rough patch, parted for a couple of months, then reconciled. I still believed her when she said, "He's your son." I know it. He was born around that time. And for 3 years, I lived as if fatherhood belonged to me. Until that moment, a part of me had wanted to believe the whisper of that man's name was no more than a passing mistake. But the cold, black and white lines of that DNA report drove the final nail in. My mind reeled with the knowledge that Alex Griffin was the real father of the boy I'd been raising. And now, the man had filed legal motions, apparently to ensure child support, custody rights, or something that tangled me in a system I didn't fully understand. It took me a moment to notice that the petition stated, "The mother, Victoria Finch, acknowledges the child's father is Alex Griffin." She'd known, of course. She'd known the entire time. More than that, she had cooperated in these new legal steps, all behind my back. My chest felt hollow, like my lungs had been ripped out. My eyes stung with tears that refused to fall. Slowly, I headed inside. The living room had never felt so alien. The house smelled of coffee and floor polish. There on the side table was a photo from last Christmas. Victoria Finch in a red sweater, me in a hideous reindeer cardigan, and the boy, wearing a grin. The boy whose earliest words I'd taught, whose tiny hand I'd guided around a crayon, whose tears I dried at night when he woke up scared by the wind outside. And he wasn't mine. I clenched my jaw. No tears, just an avalanche of disbelief and a rising, savage pain that felt close to madness. I confronted Victoria that very afternoon. When I placed the court papers on the kitchen table in front of her, she blanched. Her face drained of color so quickly, I thought she might faint. The boy was in daycare, so we were alone in the house. She stared at the pages, lips quivering. "Michael," she whispered, and I noticed how rarely she used my name these days. "This is just. They forced me to sign the documents." He threatened me. I didn't. "Stop." My voice came out low, controlled but cold. It was as if my entire system had shut down to keep me from lashing out. "Victoria Finch, say it to my face. Say what you did." She closed her eyes, shook her head. "It's not like that. Alex and I. It happened a long time ago, while you and I were fighting. You left for a month, remember? The baby. I thought he was yours, but don't lie to me." I stepped closer. I could see her trembling, tears forming in her eyes. It occurred to me she was once the same woman who passionately vowed to stand by me always. "You got a DNA test done behind my back. You never told me the results, did you?" She swallowed hard. I was confused, Michael. Then Alex offered to do it quietly. He promised he wouldn't cause trouble. I was scared you'd leave me for good. I let out a harsh laugh that felt hollow. "So you just decided to keep me around. Let me think I was raising my son, while you and your lover planned out your next move." She reached out as if to touch my arm, and I jerked away. In her eyes, I saw panic. "Michael, please, don't do this. Don't." He wasn't supposed to file those papers. This is all him forcing the issue now. "I swear." "Don't you dare swear anything to me," I said. My pulse pounded in my ears. "You swore on our wedding day. And look how that turned out." She began to cry softly, but I felt no compassion. It was the strangest sensation to stand there, hearing her sob, and feel so close yet so far. Her tears had no effect on me. It was as if something vital inside me had snapped. I turned without another word, left her there in the kitchen. That evening, I did the only thing that made sense. I packed a single bag of clothes and took a few personal items. I left the rest behind. The house, the furniture, the decorations she picked out, the memories that felt like illusions. I wrote a single line in thick black marker on the mirror in the foyer. "Here died a husband." When I finished, I leaned my forehead against the mirror and closed my eyes. I could almost smell the sharpness of the marker's ink. In that reflection, my tired eyes, the tightness around my mouth, I barely recognized myself. Even the posture, shoulders squared, jaw set, a tension I'd never seen in my own face before. Something in me was gone, irretrievably, but what replaced it was a cold finality. I left the mirror that way, a testament to whatever I'd once been. Victoria Finch didn't try to stop me. She hovered by the staircase, face streaked with tears, arms wrapped around herself, as I walked out the door. I moved into a motel on the outskirts of town. The place had a neon sign that flickered VACANCY in a faint red glow and looked like it had seen better decades. I paid for a week in cash, telling the clerk I'd figure out the rest later. The room had walls the color of stale coffee, a battered dresser with a missing handle, and a bed that squeaked whenever I shifted my weight. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the chipped pattern on the wall. That first night, I couldn't sleep. My entire body screamed with exhaustion, but my brain refused to shut off. Thoughts circled. The boy's first steps, how proud I'd been. The day we'd gone to the beach as a family, and I carried him on my shoulders. The night he had a fever, and I stayed up wiping his forehead with a cool cloth. Each memory hammered home a single brutal reminder. He's not yours. He never was. I felt an urge to put a gun to my temple and end it. That raw, horrifying thought came uninvited, but it lodged in my mind. If I'm not a husband, not a father, then what am I? I had to grit my teeth to push it away. I wasn't a religious man, but I prayed in that desperate half-sleep for daylight to come, for the torment to fade. Each time my thoughts slipped, I'd see him, Alex Griffin, touching her, kissing her, fathering the child I believed was mine. My stomach twisted so viciously, I almost threw up. Morning came slowly, with pale light creeping under the thin motel curtains. I forced myself to get up, to shower in water that fluctuated between too hot and ice cold. Then I drove back to the house, our house, though now it felt more like a stage set built on top of my personal grave. I wanted to see if she'd had the decency to clean off that mirror. Maybe my words still stood in black marker. Part of me craved evidence of how deep I could wound her. I parked down the street and just watched. It was an old habit of mine. When uncertain, observe first. Sure enough, I saw her silhouette through one of the windows, flicking lights on and off. The child wasn't visible. Possibly in daycare again. She came out to the mailbox, stood there, scanning the street. She paused, glancing in the direction of my car, or maybe just the direction of the traffic, though there was little to speak of. Then she went inside. She was expecting me to come back, I realized. She half believed I'd storm in, demand to talk, demand to fix something. But I just sat there, engine off, letting the minutes crawl by. An hour passed. 2. Eventually, I started my car and drove to the office, as if trying to salvage some normalcy. The day at work was a blur. My boss glanced at me once, frowned, asked if I was feeling better. I gave a non-committal nod. My coworkers kept their distance. It was obvious I wasn't in a frame of mind to chat. I answered emails, returned phone calls, but I don't remember any of it. Later, I found myself driving again to the same spot across from the house. She turned off the main lights, leaving only a dim glow in the living room. Night fell, and I watched her silhouette move behind the curtains. She looked out the window, as if searching for me, checking the driveway. Some primal part of me wanted to show up at the front door just to see her reaction. But I didn't. I let the emotional tension twist in my chest. Night after night, I repeated the same ritual. I'd rent a different motel room each time, some nights even in the same motel, but a different door number or a different worn bed. Then I'd spend hours out in my car, parked so I could see the house. She would come out to the mailbox or step onto the porch, maybe thinking I'd appear. But I never did. On one level, it might have seemed like I was punishing myself, but on another, it was the only retribution I could imagine. Letting her know I was there, possibly, yet never letting her see me. She'd live in that limbo, day after day. We'd had a 10th wedding anniversary not so long ago. I remember the boy carrying the rings to us, waddling in an oversized little tuxedo vest, beaming up at me. My chest had swelled with pride. Victoria Finch had tears of joy, or so I thought. I replayed that memory now with a bitter tinge of disgust. She'd let me teach him how to walk, to stand straight, to hold a ring cushion, all the while aware that my blood did not run in his veins. The final betrayal. 3 weeks passed like that. My life fractured into 2 parts, my job, which I clung to purely to avoid collapsing financially, and my nights spent in that punishing vigil. Day by day, I got colder. Numbness sank deeper. I avoided calls from my parents. I had nothing to say to them. My manager suggested I take time off, some personal leave. I refused, because what would I do with free time? Sit alone in a motel room with a gun in my mouth. Some nights, I genuinely wanted to die. The only reason I didn't do it was a faint sense of, I don't know if it was pride or sheer cowardice. Maybe I just refused to let that final bullet be her victory. Or maybe I hoped the pain would eventually dull. But the desire to vanish, to stop feeling anything, never fully left. Every morning I'd wake in a strange bed and wonder if I have enough strength to face the day. One particular night, I saw something that snapped me out of my daze. She opened the door, and there he was, Alex Griffin. He stood in a sleek suit, posture confident, that grin I'd always found unsettling. The boy stood behind Victoria, clutching the doorframe, not quite sure what was happening. Then the boy squealed, "Daddy," and ran to him. Alex lifted him up, gave him a playful toss in the air, and the child giggled. The sound of that giggle hit me like a sledgehammer. Victoria looked torn. She glanced around, maybe to see if I was there, or if neighbors were watching. But her expression softened as Alex said something I couldn't make out. The three of them went inside, shutting the door. I sat in my car, knuckles white on the steering wheel, feeling more lost than I thought possible. My chest burned. My eyes stung, but I still couldn't cry. The tears were jammed somewhere behind the numbness. That was the first time I saw them together as a family. A unit. A father, mother, and child. I, the man who once thought he was father and husband, was on the outside, pressing my forehead against the cold glass of the driver's side window. Invisible. I can't say how I found the strength to confront Alex Griffin in person, but it happened a few days later. I'd forced myself to accept that running away from this wasn't an option if I wanted closure, or vengeance, possibly both. I'd discovered that he owned a wedding planning agency downtown, with a fancy sign over the door, Griffin Events, where happily ever after begins. The irony punched me in the gut. I marched inside, fists shaking at my sides. The receptionist was a young woman, all bright smiles and polished nails. "Can I help you, sir?" I said nothing, just breezed past her. The place was decked out in floral displays, sample invitations, color swatches, overly sweet perfumed air. Finally, I found him in a side office, leaning over a table with a couple, presumably clients. The couple looked startled at my sudden intrusion. "Mr. Griffin," I said, my voice flat. He turned around slowly. His gaze flicked to me, recognized me, and for a moment I caught the subtle spark of surprise in his eyes. Then his expression hardened into a polite, businesslike mask. "I'm in the middle of a meeting," he said. I folded my arms. "We need to talk." The couple looked at me uncertainly. Alex pressed his lips into a thin line, then apologized to them in a smooth tone. Something about, "Could you excuse me a moment?" The couple stepped aside. He led me to a corridor, out of their earshot. He towered just slightly over me, his posture confident, broad shoulders squared. "Michael Finch," he said calmly, "you have no right to come here like this. It's about that child support claim you filed." My voice was quiet, but my pulse hammered in my neck. "What the hell are you trying to pull? You wanted me out of the picture, didn't you? Now you have Victoria Finch, and your kid. Is that it?" He gave me a condescending smile. "Victoria made her choice. The boy is my son. You should have realized that earlier, saved everyone the trouble." Anger rose in me, a slow, furious heat in my throat. "You couldn't just let me find out the normal way. You had to drag me into court documents." His grin widened fractionally. "I don't see a ring on your finger anymore, Finch. So it looks like you're out, whether you like it or not. She belongs to me now. Always did, from the start. The legal stuff is just a formality." In that instant, I wanted to break his jaw. My body vibrated with tension, fists clenching, but a savage calm overcame me. I recalled the 1,000 nights I'd spent imagining his face, the fantasies of planting my fist in his perfect grin. So many times, I'd pictured how it would feel to watch him bleed. Instead, I forced my voice to stay even. "Take her," I said, surprising even myself with the coldness of my tone. "Because I'm done with her. Done with all of this. But understand, I'm not signing anything until I see you face some consequences. You've turned my life into a joke. Congratulations. But if you think there's no price to pay, you're wrong." He gave a casual shrug. "We'll see. You have no leverage. Victoria and I have the child. The DNA is on record. You're just a bitter ex-husband. Move on. I glared at him for a moment longer, then let out a short laugh. Funny. You think you've won, but you don't realize there's nothing you can take from me that I haven't already lost. You want to fight? I'll give you a war. He stepped closer, dropping his voice. Don't test me. You have no idea who I am, what I can do. Same goes to you, I hissed. I turned on my heel and walked out, ignoring the stunned looks of the clients who had overheard bits of our exchange. I didn't go straight back to the motel. I drove aimlessly, fists white on the steering wheel, mind spinning. I wanted to do something reckless, to blow up his agency, to slash his tires, to ruin him. Yet something told me that I'd fall into a legal pit if I did that. He was cunning, with resources, probably waiting for me to slip up so he could bury me. Instead, I returned to a quiet place by the river where Victoria Finch and I once picnicked. The water was black and glossy under the late afternoon sky. Leaves drifted along the surface, swirling aimlessly. I stayed there until dusk, thinking of all the things I could do. On that lonely shore, the idea of simply ceasing to exist revisited me, like a phantom. Maybe this was bigger than me. But the more I lingered on it, the more I realized the only meaningful act of revenge I had left was to deny them my misery. If I crumbled, if I died, they'd have everything, including the last word. Nighttime found me back in front of our old house again, parked in the shadows. Lights shone in the upstairs bedroom. A silhouette, hers, moved across the window, then vanished. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. An unknown number. I had a feeling it was her. I picked up anyway, more from curiosity than anything. Michael? Her voice was hesitant. I didn't respond. She took a shaky breath. I can see your car. Please, come in. Talk to me. We can fix this. I promise. I exhaled slowly, the foam hot against my ear. There is no we anymore, Victoria Finch. A whimper on her end. Don't say that. I know I hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted any of this. He forced my hand with the paternity test. He threatened me. That's enough. I cut her off coldly. You think I'm an idiot, that I don't know you went behind my back to confirm the test in secret before the child was even born. Silence, followed by a muffled sob. I was scared, okay. I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I kept telling myself I'd come clean after the baby was born, but you were so happy to be a father. I couldn't ruin that. Then Alex decided to ruin it for you, right? She let out a choked breath. He changed his mind. He said he wants his son in his life. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd drag me through an ugly custody battle. Michael, I never wanted to lose you. I swear. Another wave of bitterness rose in me, so strong I nearly gagged. You whisper his name in your sleep, I said quietly. Did you think I didn't notice? She was quiet a long moment. Then the line crackled with her voice, rising in desperation. I love you, Michael, despite everything I do. Let me fix this. Let's talk. Please. I felt no tenderness at all. It was like gazing into a crater where my heart used to be. I'm done talking. Keep the house. I ended the call before she could respond. For a moment, I sat there, foam clutched in my hand, my breath shaky. She called back. I watched the phone vibrate, the screen lighting up with that unknown number. I didn't answer. The next morning, I showed up at a lawyer's office. The place was small, recommended by a friend of a friend. The lawyer, a heavy-set man in a worn suit, listened to my story with a quiet, grim expression. When I finished, he sighed, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Legally, you're not the father, correct?" I nodded. He frowned. "That means, from a family court standpoint, you have no obligations for child support. Alex Griffin's paternity claim is basically disclaiming you. If there's any question about a prior assumption that you were the father, that's undone by a verified DNA test. So, in other words, I'm free. I asked, a shaky relief stirring in my chest. He nodded. Yes, though if she tries to claim some form of spousal support, that's a separate matter. Oregon law might consider the child was led to believe you were his father, but with the DNA test, that's moot. Unless she tries to argue emotional support for the child. But honestly, that's an uphill battle. She's more likely to chase Alex for child support, which apparently is what's happening. I exhaled, raking a hand through my hair. The lawyer studied me carefully. Listen, he said gently, I can draw up divorce papers. No contest. We can finalize it quickly, especially if property division is straightforward. Are you sure you want to just leave the house to her? I thought of the memories. The mirror with that black scrawl. Here died a husband. I'm sure, I said. I want nothing from her. He nodded, scribbling notes. I'll start the process. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't get into a fight you can't win. If this Alex fellow is as manipulative as you say, he'll try to provoke you. Don't respond. Don't sabotage your own future. I wanted to laugh at the notion of a future, but I kept my face impassive. Thank you, I muttered. Keh. As the weeks dragged on, I fell into a routine. I'd work during the day, then spend my nights at random motels, occasionally dozing in my car. Some nights, I parked near the house, always in a different spot so she wouldn't be certain of my presence. I'd see glimpses of her silhouette, see lights flick on and off. She'd come outside sometimes, stand on the porch, peer into the darkness, as though hoping I'd be there, ready to come home. But I never answered her silent calls. If I even glimpsed Alex Griffin's car in the driveway, I felt a red-hot fury. Then I'd drive away, forcing myself to remain calm. The last thing I wanted was to give him the satisfaction of seeing me reduced to an unhinged ex-husband. My revenge had taken on a simpler shape, letting her existence revolve around uncertainty, day after day, while I inched toward the final severing of ties. I processed the divorce documents with cold efficiency. My lawyer had them delivered. She tried calling me repeatedly. I never picked up. I refused to meet her in person. Her frantic texts pleaded for one more chance to talk. I skimmed them, my jaw tightening, and deleted them. Some part of me recognized this was my brand of vengeance. I was punishing her, yes, but I was also punishing myself. Each time I saw her messages, I recalled the shape of her body next to mine at night, the perfume on her neck, how her lips felt. Memories battered me, torn between longing and revulsion. The paradox of missing the woman I'd loved and despising the person she'd become. One day, I decided to do something with the rest of my personal belongings. The house was still half mine after all. But I didn't want a confrontation, so I planned to collect my things when she was out. The schedule I remembered told me she'd be at her event planning job, possibly picking up the boy from daycare afterward. Perfect opportunity. I let myself in using my key. Inside, the place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The living room was largely unchanged, but the walls were bare where our pictures once hung. My chest tightened, recalling the morning I'd shredded those photos. On the coffee table, a single new photograph in a frame. Victoria Finch holding the boy in her lap, and Alex Griffin kneeling beside them. The child looked happy, the parents, well, the mother and father, smiling at the camera. One new, perfect family portrait. I wanted to smash it. But I didn't. Instead, I turned it face down. I gathered my items quietly. A few clothes, a couple of books, a watch my father gave me, personal documents, my old baseball glove from the spare closet. Everything else I abandoned. Then I wandered into the foyer, eyes drawn to the mirror. The words I'd scrawled were still there. Here died a husband. They'd faded somewhat, as though she'd tried wiping them away but hadn't fully succeeded. A few faint streaks of black marker remained. The reflection that stared back at me was a man with haunted eyes, face harder than I remembered, cheeks slightly hollow from weight I must have lost. I touched my stubble, vaguely recalling the old me who used to shave daily, used to greet each morning with at least some spark of optimism. A footstep echoed behind me. I turned sharply. Victoria Finch stood there, grocery bag in one arm, keys in the other. She wore a simple blouse, her hair pinned up, and her eyes were wide with shock to find me in the hall. I hadn't heard her come in. "Michael." She clutched the bag so tightly I thought she might crush it. "You came back." I said nothing. My mind whirled, searching for an escape route. But I couldn't just vanish. She inched forward, swallowing. I thought you'd never come inside again." I lifted the duffel I'd filled with my things, just picking up what's left. She set the groceries on the floor gently. Her eyes flitted to the words on the mirror. "I tried wiping that off so many times," her voice cracked. "But it won't go away." I stared at her, still silent. She took a shaky breath. "Michael, did you get the divorce papers?" she asked, voice trembling. "I saw them. Is that truly what you want?" I exhaled slowly. "You think I'd want any other option after what you did?" Her eyes filled with tears. She stepped closer. I was weak. "I messed up. Maybe the child was never yours. But you were the one who was here, helping me, supporting me. I was so sure you'd leave if I told you. But don't you see how sorry I am?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Sorry. For the lie you maintained 3 years. For naming me on the birth certificate. For letting me think he was mine. Or for letting me find out the way I did." My voice rose with each question. "Which part are you sorry for?" She blinked tears from her lashes, her voice choking up. "All of it," she whispered. "I was terrified you'd walk away, and I'd be alone. I made the wrong choice, and I hate myself for it." I felt a flare of anger at how easily she could claim regret after the damage was done. I took a step back, glancing at the mirror behind me. "Look," I said tersely, "I'm not here to rehash old wounds. I'm done. Sign the papers, keep the house. This is the last time you'll see me under this roof." She let out a small sob, pressing a hand over her mouth. Don't do that, please." I turned away, stepping toward the door. In a sudden burst, she grabbed my arm. I looked down, startled by the desperation in her eyes. "Don't leave like this," she croaked. "Don't let him be the reason our marriage ends. If we can just talk, if—" She must have felt the tension in my bicep, the way my body coiled like a spring. "He was always going to be the reason," I said, my voice shaking. "From the moment you whispered his name in our bed." Her grip loosened. I could see the devastation on her face. Then her expression twisted, tears turning into anger. "You never tried to understand me," she spat. "We drifted apart long before Alex. You were so busy with your job, so focused on being the perfect man. You forgot I had needs too. I was lonely, Michael." A trembling wave of fury washed through me, but I forced it down. "That's a pitiful excuse for betrayal." She broke down crying again, voice ragged. "Maybe it is, but I wish you believed me when I said I loved you." The air vibrated with raw emotion. For a second, I did recall the woman I loved, her laugh, her warmth. But the next instant, the memory of her whispering, "Alex," snapped my compassion in two. My chest felt heavy, the sorrow so profound it numbed my arms and legs. I gently pried her hand off my arm. "Goodbye, Victoria Finch," I said. Then I walked out. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I never saw her face in court. Our lawyers handled everything, and we didn't contest. She kept the house. I absolved any claim on it. She walked away from the marriage with our physical possessions. I walked away with what was left of my soul, though it felt worthless. Maybe that's exactly what I wanted. A total severance. Let her remain in the shell that once was our home, haunted by that partial scrawl in black marker. Every so often, I'd park down the street again. Morbid curiosity, perhaps. I watched her stand by the mailbox in the evenings, scanning for any sign of me. I found a twisted satisfaction in her waiting, unfulfilled. Alex Griffin's car came and went, sometimes staying overnight, sometimes leaving with the boy in a child's seat. I'd see them walk to the curb, pick up the mail, glance around. Always searching, always hoping might appear, but I never did. Weeks turned into months. My life was an empty routine. I half expected to find some miraculous relief in the freedom from my old responsibilities, but the truth was, I felt like a ghost drifting between motels. At some point, I realized I needed to make a definitive break from this city. Move on, find another place, maybe even another state. The heartbreak felt anchored to the streets of Portland, to the swirling gloom of the gray sky. I decided I'd had enough. One last night, I drove by the house, parked across from it again, engine idling. Lights inside flickered off, then on. I could make out Victoria Finch's figure in the living room, pacing with a phone in her hand. She paused at the window, drew back the curtain, stared out into the darkness. For an instant, I allowed myself to imagine what she might be thinking, that I'd reemerge, declare my love or start a final confrontation. But I had no interest in that. I left the engine running, half hoping she'd see the reflection of my headlights. She didn't. She turned away from the window, her shoulders slumped. Then the living room light clicked off. The place was swallowed by night. I gazed for another minute or two, feeling an odd sense of closure. Then, in a sudden motion, I pressed my palm against the steering wheel. My horn blasted, a single jarring note that shattered the quiet. The curtains rustled. A light came on again. I imagined her confusion, her racing heart, as she recognized the silhouette of my car. But by the time she reached the window, I'd shifted into gear and rolled down the street, away from her life for good. A few days after that, I pulled into the last motel I'd stay at in Portland. I'd already quit my job. My apartment lease was never renewed. My possessions were now stuffed in my trunk. I'd drive east come morning, maybe to an entirely different state. There was nothing left for me here. I stepped into that stale motel room. The same brown carpet, the smell of bleach. I placed my keys on the dresser, sank onto the bed. Out of habit, I pulled my phone from my pocket, glanced at it. 20 unread messages, all from her. I scrolled through them without reading. My chest felt like lead. The emptiness pressed down on my ribcage, cold and suffocating. And yet, for the first time, I sensed that the grief was about to reach its end. Or at least it would slip into the background, part of me forever, but no longer controlling me. The final act of this tragedy was near. One more push and I'd be free to rebuild, or die trying. Something within me let out a silent cry. I don't want to feel any of this anymore. I closed my eyes, remembering the moment I wrote those words on the mirror in black marker. Here died a husband. Now, I whispered to the empty room. And here begins a man. I left Portland before sunrise, driving east on the interstate, letting the road swallow me. I had no plan, but that was the point. My only goal was to outrun the nightmares I'd been living with. A new state, a new city, maybe a fresh start. Something to bury the bitterness of what I'd lost. The pain sat inside me like a rotten core. But the further I drove, the more I believed that one day, perhaps I could live around it, if not rid myself of it completely. For hours, farmland and rolling hills stretched on either side of the highway. A flurry of thoughts swirled in my head, but I kept them at bay, focusing on the hum of the engine. It was a strange feeling. I wasn't necessarily hopeful, but I wasn't dead inside either. The ache of betrayal was still raw. The memory of the boys' laughter still tore at my heart when I let it. But the sense of being caged in the same place with them, her and Alex, was gone. I stopped at a dingy rest area around noon. The sun glinted off the asphalt, and trucks rumbled in and out. I found a bench overlooking a patch of yellow grass. Sitting there, I let the wind ruffle my hair. The sky was bright, a wide dome of possibility. I took in a deep breath, letting the air fill my lungs. In that moment, a fleeting thought. Would I ever love again? The question felt almost absurd, like a distant fantasy. But under the scabbing wound, some faint, desperate part of me still believed in the concept of love. Just not with Victoria Finch. I knew I'd never speak her name again, except as a cautionary tale. My mouth twisted in a bitter grin, remembering how she whispered not my name that fateful night. I closed my eyes, listening to the dull roar of traffic. A day would come, I told myself, when the memory of her face, her voice, his child, and their betrayal wouldn't yank the ground out from under me. A day when I'd no longer feel the urge to destroy everything or vanish into a loaded pistol's hollow barrel. Until that day, I'd keep driving, keep living, keep letting the pain transform me into someone else, someone who might handle heartbreak differently if it ever happened again. The scars would remain, but so would I. I stood up, stretched the stiffness out of my back. The road beckoned. Time to keep going. With each mile, I drifted further from the house, the mirror, the dead marriage, and the city that held all my broken dreams. On the horizon, the sun shone harsh and relentless, but it was still the best light I'd seen in weeks. I got into my car, turned the ignition, and drove on, the engine's steady thrum echoing the battered rhythm of my heart. A million thoughts could have crowded in, but I let them fade into the background. Maybe the only real vengeance, in the end, was to take back control of my own life, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. And so I left it all behind. No more quiet vigils, no more illusions, no more forced fatherhood. I gave Victoria Finch what she thought she wanted, my absence. I gave Alex Griffin his claim, paternity. Let them figure out how to live with each other's lies. I wanted to believe that one day, the memory of that whispered name would be just another story I tell myself on lonely nights. One more scar among many. Not visible, but deep, clinging to the bones. Maybe that's all pain is. An invisible brand. You can't see it, but it chews at you from inside. And when you finally peel yourself away from it, you realize that the person you were is gone. In his place stands someone else, someone who lived through betrayal, through heartbreak, through death, death of illusions, death of trust. Yet you're still breathing. I realized that was enough to keep the wheels turning as I fled west to east. Enough to quiet the suicidal whispers that had stalked me for so many nights. Enough perhaps to cling to the raw hope that a man who died in one sense might resurrect himself in another, forging the new life from the wreckage. And so, with the road unraveling before me and the harsh sun overhead, I whispered the only name that mattered, my own. Michael Finch. And I found that I could still say it, still exist, still be that man, even after everything. I pressed down on the gas, feeling the engine rumble. The wind whipped past my window. One day, I promised myself, I would look in a mirror and see someone whole again.